So this time of year is just prime time. It's when, accountants are now the popular kids in school. Now people are reaching out to tax preparers. People are reaching out to accountants. People are posting all over social media and saying, does anyone know a good accountant? And this is the time of year that a lot of people revisit the relationship they have with their professional and they really rethink, what is it I really want in that relationship? And is the person I'm currently with giving me that? And a lot of times people will approach me, approach other professionals and say, hey, can you recommend somebody who's really good? And a lot of the times people would come to me and ask if I can do their taxes. Now, we don't offer that as a standalone service. So we have a list of people that we typically refer people to. And what I've realized is that, yes, it is very difficult to find someone who meets all of your qualifications. And it's even harder to identify what those qualifications actually are, because who are you to judge the professional, right? Because the only qualification you're aware of is they know how to do taxes. So let me explain to you, number one, why it's so hard to find somebody, because I'm going to tell you exactly why it's so hard. But number two, I'm going to give you some cheat codes on how you can find the right professional for you based on what it is you care about. But we're going to unpack how you figure that out. So why is it so dang hard to find a tax pro? So there are a couple of reasons. One is that, typically we gravitate toward, as customers, we gravitate toward the convenient. So we'll have a tax pro who is the person who does our family's taxes, the person who's always done your taxes since you were a kid. And now you have your own business and now you're going to still do it. Or maybe it's a family friend, or maybe it's just the person down the street because I don't know what I'm looking for in a tax pro. And what ends up happening is you have a relationship with them, but you haven't been intentional about why you hired them other than convenience. So that is the only thing you're getting of value from them sometimes, is the convenience. So when it's so hard to find somebody that jives with you, it's because you're not putting out there what you're looking for. You're looking for convenience and that's what you're getting. So maybe you don't mesh with them well because you didn't really interview for that. You didn't really vet them for, are they the same risk tolerance as me? Are they the same communicator as me? Are they going to cater to my expectations? What are the expectations I have of them? And what are the expectations they have of me? These questions have to be addressed. It's like any relationship, especially somebody who's going to see you financially naked. So it's really important that you unpack this for yourself and you're able to articulate this to a possible partner in your business, which I would consider your accountant, your tax advisor, to be a partner with you and somebody who's going to be able to serve you very closely. Now, it's so hard to find somebody because I'll tell you, this is my interpretation. Now, is this fact? Maybe not. We're all making up our own facts anyway, based on our own truth and our own experience. But I have found it's really hard to find tax pros that I can recommend. And here's why. Typically, I would say people who gravitate toward the accounting profession typically are the types of people who are really heads down workers. They like numbers. They like the science of it. They like to do the actual tax work, but they may not like a lot of the client servicey, extroverted type of requirements that it takes to run their own business. And they may not be the best communicators. So what I have found is you're typically going to find accountants who are not the best at proactively communicating. Typically. I know there are some exceptions out there, but typically you're going to have challenges where they may not respond to you. It's also really hard to find someone who is quote unquote good, which is subjective, because they're so busy this time of year that they're not responding to you, but because they're so busy. I've been in this situation too, where I'm like, I will get around to it. Please stop bugging me, asking me where your return is. We know we have to do it for you. Trust me, we want to get it done before the deadline, but trust our process. It's all in process. We have a kitchen back here where we're cooking everything, and you saying, hey, where's my dinner over and over again is making that slow down because we have to jump out and talk to you. Now, is that a hassle for accountants? Yes. However, if they have a good system, and this is why it's so hard to find a good accountant, because many of them are also not very technologically savvy. They're generally in the older generations right now. Again, I'm generalizing out the wazoo, but typically you're going to find accountants who are still working with paper files via email, maybe an ancient online portal. They're not working in the modern economy. So they are now dropping everything they're doing, calling you or messaging you or whatever to say, hey, here's where your return is. And they're breaking their process to go do that. What should ideally be happening is it's not that hard, honestly, to implement this, is they should be having some type of protocol where when your return reaches a certain stage, they can send you a proactive update. Like we've implemented this and we are implementing this where once your return hits a certain stage in our workflow, you're going to get an email saying, by the way, your return is now in review status. So which means you should be hearing from us soon. Most of the time, you as a customer, what I've learned is all we want as customers is to feel seen and to know that that everything's in process, that nothing got lost. So we're just making sure it's still there. Like you're still working on it, right? Yeah. So just the peace of mind. Most accountants don't understand that all you want is the peace of mind. They think that you want the detailed status and you want it done faster. When in reality, it's like, no, just acknowledge that you're working on it, please. And this is how I operate too. I'm just going, hey, can I just get like a quick little status update? I don't want you to do it any faster. I don't want to rush you. If the status is phase 2 out of 10, cool. I don't care. Just tell me what phase we're in so that I have an idea of where things stand and where I am in the queue, right? Because at least even at the DMV, you get those little 37 or whatever, the bank counter, and you wait for your number to get called. But you know kind of where you are based on where they're currently calling. When it comes to tax pros, there's no number. You don't even know where you are in line. So it's hard to know. So unless your accountant is a super proactive communicator and tech savvy enough to implement something like this, it's really hard for them to be able to share that with you. So it's really hard to find somebody who will embrace something like that. It's also hard to find somebody who thinks ahead of that experience because most accountants are used to being order takers. Okay, so understand this, that accountants sell water bottles in the desert. Okay, so they're used to people coming up to them and just buying their services. If they sell tax return preparation, they are basically order takers. Why? Because they sell a service that as of right now, is essential. So everybody needs their taxes done. It's just a question of, are you going to do it yourself? Use a out-of-the-box software, use a tax pro, whatever it is. Everybody needs to do it. So basically it's an economy of I provide a service that isn't going away. Now, forget AI for a second. Up until now, it's really required the intervention of a person for most people. So we've gotten by as a profession selling water bottles in the desert, selling what people already need. So knowing that this is something they have to do, it just becomes a question of who they're hiring. And they know that you go with convenience, or they know that there really isn't a way to differentiate, a quality tax return from the eyes of the person. You wouldn't know listening. You wouldn't know a good tax return from a bad tax return. All you would probably look at is good versus bad based on how the refund is. But that doesn't necessarily mean good and bad. It could be completely wrong and have a massive refund. So how do you actually know? And how does this actually work? Well, up until now, they've been order takers. And I like to think that in order to develop your skills as a business owner, in order to really hone in on your value and to work on the value you give your customer, I think you have to develop sales skills. And I think that the more you have to sell your services and articulate your value and persuade people to trust you in the form of a sale, that the better off you're going to be at communicating, because you're going to be really clear on what value you offer, and you're not going to treat yourself like an order taker. And therefore, you're not going to have a process akin to an order taker, because you're going to have to go through the process of really developing a relationship and developing trust with your client. So for me, it's more about delivering a service that is not transactional. Most accountants are transactional. They're order takers. They have just wait for people to call them and say, hey, I want to hire you. I mean, wouldn't that be great if your sales process was sit around and wait for phone calls to come in because people are starving for what you need, what you sell, right? But here's the thing. Most of us don't operate that way. Most of us are like, well, that would be nice, but then I'm not really picking my clients. I'm not really prospecting. I'm really not putting forth the effort. People are just lining up to talk to me. And most accountants aren't turning away clients. So they're taking in a lot of clients. They're taking in, I don't have the stats in front of me, but I think there are definitely hundreds of clients for every accountant, even if they work in a big firm. You have a 10-person firm, you're talking about hundreds of clients per person in that firm. And they have to get those hundreds of returns done every year. Hundreds. And don't be surprised if they don't remember everything about you. Don't be surprised if they don't remember a ton of information, or they just don't have the time to meet with all of you every month or all of you every quarter, because the service you are purchasing most of the time is simply the service to prepare your tax return. So why you perceive that it's so hard to find a good tax pro is most of the time when you say it's so hard to find someone good, what you're really saying is it's so hard to find someone who provides me more than an annual piece of paper. And it's not hard if you're asking. The difference is the communication barrier between what you're ordering and what you're getting served. So what is happening is you're asking for an accountant, you're asking for a tax pro, and you're saying, I need a good accountant. Well, what does that mean? What does good mean? So number one, define that. Does that mean I'm communicating with them monthly? Does that mean that they have a Slack channel I can chat in? Does that mean I can text them? Does that mean that they respond to me within 48 hours? What does that mean? What does good mean to you? And that's going to be a lot clearer. Number two is what you're really saying is that there's a mismatch between my expectations and what they're giving me, typically. And both of you might be wrong. And let me explain that. So what the accountant probably thinks is that, okay, well, you just bought tax prep services. You're only paying me $300 a year. Of course, you're not going to get to call me every month. Of course, you're not going to get extra support. Of course, you're not going to be able to just like interrupt my dinner to call me and ask me questions. So there might be a disconnect there with what are you paying? And then what are you getting? And making sure that's in alignment. But then also from your expectation standpoint, did you lay out in your initial meeting and in the engagement letter, did you lay out in your contract that like, I can call you with questions, or that we're going to meet every month for an hour at a time? Did you agree that they were going to help you with tax planning? Did you agree that they were going to help you with bookkeeping? You know, I think that people will misjudge and say this was a bad accountant because they did your taxes, but they didn't do your books for you. But you didn't order that. So I'm not blaming you, but I am saying that in a communication misalignment, there's typically something in between the two parties that goes sideways. And it's not just one person's fault. So I wouldn't label them as a bad accountant. What I would label it as is there was a misalignment here in services provided and my expectations. So how do you bridge that gap? Number one, you get better about what you're ordering. Now, I'm not putting the onus completely on you as the business owner. That's not fair. Because us as professionals, we typically know better than you what's on the menu and what we recommend. And we know what you're probably hungry for. So much of my professionals out there, do a better job of explaining your menu and explaining what would ensure the greatest success for that client, regardless of fees, regardless of, don't pull the mechanic thing that's just like, oh, you came in for an oil change and here's 3 other things wrong with you. You have to be careful with that. But at the same time, business owners are relying on us as professionals to be able to articulate, here's what I would do. If I wanted to ensure your ultimate success and take you from A to B, here are the steps I would follow. Let me know what of these you're interested in. No pressure. Versus, having like, well, they come to you and say, hey, I need my taxes done. And you go, okay, great. I can do that for you. No problem. The problem is that business owners will say, I need my taxes done. But what they really mean is, I need my taxes done. I want to do tax planning. I want to call you. I want to meet every month. So let's define what that actually means. And then on the business owner front, you also have to articulate through ordering what you want a little bit better in terms of dissecting what that means to you. The hard part is that we have the most complicated menu on the planet as accountants. And we are really difficult to order from because what might be tax prep to me might be different than somebody next door to me. So the important thing is to walk in with zero assumptions and say, and I want you to articulate what you want. This is the most effective way to do this. I promise you. Articulate what it is you want based on the problems that you need solved. So you say, okay, here is what I need. I need you to recommend me services, but here are my primary concerns. Number one, I need my taxes filed every year. Number two, I would love to be able to meet with someone quarterly to discuss tax planning and tax minimization. Number three, I would love it if someone could look over my books before year end. Oh, and I need someone to do my 1099s. Oh, and I need sales and use tax filed. So if you can really think about what are the steps, what are the things that you need done, then you can properly scope what it is they're doing, set the right expectations, and have a better alignment of communication from the get-go with a professional. It is super hard to find really good professionals, I'll admit. It's hard to find people who can communicate well with you and who aren't talking down to you or using a ton of jargon. It's not their fault though. It's how we were trained. We were kind of raised with all this jargon and we're convinced that this was common sense. But as I've discovered in the last 5 years of working with business owners of all sizes, varieties, and types, it's not the case. Not everybody was raised with this jargon in their ear and all this is common sense. This is not common sense to people. So I hope that this podcast is one of the catalysts to helping you understand some of these concepts in a more approachable way. But absent working with us or working with someone who talks the way that we do on the podcast, then I would recommend that you seek out the help of a professional by being really specific about what it is you're looking for. And if you can literally say, I'm looking for someone who can explain this to me like I'm 5, then put that in your requirements and actually call that in, actually post that on Facebook. So I'm looking for an accountant, but here's what I'm really looking for. I'm looking for someone who can explain this stuff, someone who's going to teach me, someone who's going to be by my side, someone who's going to respond to me, etc. Because that is really what's going to get you what you want, as opposed to having some broad-based request. So as we're going into this tax season, I would encourage you, get real specific about what you're looking for. And one of the ways you can do that is through the Money Pro Matchmaker. I want you to go to moneypromatchmaker.com right now, moneypromatchmaker.com. Download my free guide. It has an interview guide for every type of professional that you could hire in your business so that you can ask the right questions and really set those expectations well from the get-go.